And the Boston Red Sox are the world champions. For the first time in 86 years, the Red Sox have won baseball world championship. Can you believe it?
Tessie is the Royal Rooters rally cry. Tessie is the tune they always sung. Tessie echoed April through October nights after serenade installed the Neil Young. Tessie is a maiden with a sparkling eye. Tessie is a maiden with a love. She doesn't know the meaning of her side. She's got a comment full of love.
Well, welcome back to another episode of StraussNet Sports Radio. It is March 10th, 2025, so we have hit our spring training edition. When I last left you, I told you the Chiefs were going to beat the Eagles in a very high-scoring, close game. And I was right about one of those things. It was high-scoring for the Eagles. The Chiefs, they struggled a little. There was rumor that some players were sick. I don't know. The Eagles exposed them. They got what they wanted. They won. They did a good job. Congratulations to the Eagles. My betting buddy Tim, who we have on the show regularly, he took the Eagles and won a nice chunk of change off of that, and he was happy about that. Tim likes the quote-unquote underdog, but he doesn't like to see teams win multiple times in a row. If somebody wins, he wants to see somebody else win, and I can appreciate that. And in fact, we have Tim with us here today.
Hello, how are we doing?
And we also have my dad, Marc Strauss.
Good to be back.
We always get the group together for our spring training edition, and, you know, I say this every episode, and every episode I fall into the same trap. We are horrible at making predictions, and guess what we're going to do today? We're going to make some MLB predictions. What happened in the last season, Aaron? Well, the St. Louis Cardinals, who we always like to mention, those guys are our team, no matter how disappointing their offseason was. It's like being mad at your spouse. You still love them. They finished just outside of the playoffs. They made a nice push, did not finish where we wanted them to. This year, they have come back and put together a very similar team, minus a couple of pieces. We'll see if they can work some devil magic. But we'll get to the NL Central later. The Dodgers put together a super team and defeated the Yankees in the World Series. We'll also talk about what those two teams did in the offseason and where that puts them. For the Yankees, it's not so much the offseason additions or subtractions, but the injuries that might be catching up to them. But without much further ado, gentlemen, do you think the end of last season went the way you thought it might from spring training? All as a whole, not just Cardinals, like baseball.
Well, the Dodgers winning the World Series wasn't a big surprise. They have the best team. They spend the most money. They're so deep that if somebody gets hurt, it's like an assembly line of players to replace them. In that regard, no. I think the big surprise for a lot of people was the Cleveland Guardians, because I don't think anybody expected them to, and then early in the season they lost Shane Bieber, and they lost him, one of their best pitchers, maybe their best pitcher, and he's going to be out in the early part of this year. I think what happens is there's so many teams that are eligible for the playoffs now that it becomes harder to predict, because it seems like everybody's got a chance to make the playoffs except, the White Sox and the Oakland Athletics, who are now just the Athletics.
You and I kind of teased that before the show started when I was prepping you for what we were doing. I kind of revealed some of my picks to you already, but I said, the divisions I'm pretty sure about. My first wild card, pretty sure about. You get down to that second, third, and then the first couple of teams not making the playoffs. It's like everybody can have at it, and that's exactly what baseball wanted out of this. They wanted all sorts of chaos with this extra wild card, with the wild card round. We saw the I almost said the Eagles. The Philadelphia Phillies upsetting the Cardinals 2 years ago in the playoffs, going on to the World Series. And that's got to make for, crazy viewership, and then in sports betting, it's going to make it really hard to predict, and some interesting bets to look at.
I will completely agree with the fact that as the season went on, the Dodgers. I mean, what can you say about that? What they're doing right now is pretty ridiculous. Does another team even stand a chance? Is it is it even worth watching? Like, do we already know what's going to happen? The Indians were a big surprise. I always am looking at things. I'll admit I'm always biased because I'm always looking at everything from a betting angle, always. So, as an example, I had the Kansas City win total over 73.5. I did not expect them to do as well as they did, and that's where Cleveland was a surprise to me in winning the division. But I also Detroit and Kansas City were both huge surprises last year, and they did very, very well. That was impressive. The White Sox had a legendary season on the other end of it. I didn't expect them to win the 64 games that their over-under was at 63.5, but I did not expect them to set the record. So there were some surprises last year. I thought the Reds were going to be really good, and I actually was wrong about that. I thought the Astros were going to be better than they were. The Astros came on strong at the end of the season, but their first half was so bad that they couldn't dig out of that hole that they had put themselves in that sense. So there were some surprises in multiple areas last year.
On that note, we are going to look at those win totals for this year in our second half of the show when we talk about some betting stuff. You and I always have fun when the first day they come out. It's almost like for game goers, season ticket day, where the tickets show up at your door. When the win totals show up on Tim's phone, it means it's pretty much baseball season.
It's like Christmas for me.
Yes, we went through all that. We both took some stuff. We'll talk about that in our second half. And betting or not, we'll tell you what we took, but we'll also tell you, it's like, this number stands out, or this one honestly, a lot of them looked spot on if you're trying to predict a season, that's what the bettors want, the bookmakers want. They want you to be able to not decide and take something that is a coin flip. But we'll talk about that later. First, we're going to go into the pick'em part of the show. Let's look at the divisions. I'm going to start in the American League. We're going to go East, Central, West, 3 wild cards, and I'm going to have you guys give me 2 teams that you think can also make the playoffs that could push one of your teams out. So we'll start in the AL East. A lot of the news about the Yankees in the offseason was about Juan Soto. Juan Soto left. He went to the Mets, but the Yankees responded by going out and getting Paul Goldschmidt, an upgrade at first base defensively and most likely offensively. They got Max Fried, so they got another big-time starting pitcher. They traded for Cody Bellinger, so he can play center field. Judge can move to right field. They've wanted that for a couple years now to keep him healthier. Jason Dominguez, they're trying to get their top prospect to play left field. He's not having a great spring, but you think he's going to come around eventually. But the news is now that Giancarlo Stanton might be out for the season. And just today, it has been recommended that Garrett Cole have Tommy John surgery. We knew he was hurt with an elbow injury. We didn't know if it was Tommy John or not. Today it has been recommended. We'll see if he has it. And so while I think the Yankees can still make the playoffs, I'm going to go with Boston. Boston added Garrett Crochet. They added Walker Buehler. They got Alex Bregman. They have some top prospects coming along. I really like how Boston's building. They've built a nice bullpen, even though they don't have a surefire closer option. One of those guys will get the job done. I think there's just too many losses by Baltimore. They haven't replaced their pitching. Anthony Santander left. They added Tyler O'Neill to replace him. Not as consistent a player, even though he has the power numbers. I think the teams that kind of ran the table last year have taken steps back. The Yankees will be aggressive. They'll fix the problem. But I think the Red Sox, every few years you see a Red Sox team where they're really ready to go get it, like when they got J.D. Martinez and Chris Sale. This just reminds me of that. I think the Red Sox are going to win the AL East.
Well, I'm going to pick the Toronto Blue Jays. They've kind of flown under the radar, but they've done a lot to help their club. Vladimir Guerrero Jr.'s in his contract year, so I look for him to have a big year. He had a really good year last year. Bo Bichette is healthy. He's looked good in spring training. They added Andres Jimenez at second base, and Anthony Santander is going to be their right fielder this year. Maybe left fielder, don't know which, but he'll be in the corner. And that's 30 home runs and possibly 100 RBIs. So they've added a big bat. They've added a great defender in Jimenez, who, if he plays like he did a couple of years ago or 3 years ago, could have a better offensive season. And they've got a good rotation, and they've added Max Scherzer. And, you know, he's not going to make 30 starts, but if he can make 20 starts, and then in their bullpen, they went out and signed Jeff Hoffman from the Phillies to be their closer. I know John Schneider likes to mix and match, and I'm sure that he'll, if the lineup, you know, determines that they should pitch him in the 8th, they will. But he fills Jordan Romano's spot. It's ironic. Romano went to the Phillies, and the Blue Jays signed Hoffman from the Phillies, so they kind of traded places. So, you know, and then they have backup closers in Chad Green and Jimmy Garcia, and they also got Nick Sandlin from the Indians, the Guardians, and he's a good relief pitcher. I think they've got a good team. I think because of the Yankees' injuries to Cole and Luis Gil, that this division is wide open. Any one of several teams can win it. So I'm going to go with the Blue Jays.
Tim, what do you got?
Well, once again, I don't have. I'm doing the podcast here with two gentlemen who the information and what they have on baseball just tops me every time, and it blows my mind, and I'm always learning
but
something.
We're wrong every year,
It's
Tim.
one of the reasons why I like doing this.
But the running joke is also that every prediction we make is like a curse.
Well, I find it interesting because I'm looking at it from a perspective of you've got the Yankees down to plus 150 to win the division, the Orioles at plus 270, and Boston at plus 300. So does that mean that the Yankees now are a better value at plus 150 to still pull it off? And I just listened to someone talk about the Toronto Blue Jays winning the division, and they're at plus 1,100. So that opens my eyes to a whole different aspect of things.
Well,
See, now that's a value bet.
Now,
That
from
is a value bet.
From a
Absolutely.
betting standpoint, I think it wouldn't hurt you to put something on the Blue Jays to win the division, even if it's not a large sum of money, because they've got a very good team, and if they can stay healthy, I think the big question mark is how many starts is Max Scherzer going to give them? They've got a good rotation. Jose Barrios every year is going to give you close to 200 innings.
Well, here's something else to think about. Because when I was doing my predictions, one of my things I thought about was, okay, what kind of teams are willing to make another move to improve? And the Blue Jays tried to get a lot of the free agents the last couple of years. Remember, they tried to get Ohtani even, and teams turned him down. Some of that's for financial reasons, extra taxes when you play in Canada so much. But if at the trade deadline they're looking good, they're the type of team that could go add and become even better. So as a potential division winner, we had you said a plus 1,100?
Yes.
I have a very similar bet that I already took that we'll talk about later in the show over in the National League for the same reason it can happen.
But to give you my prediction, I'm just going to go ahead and say that the Yankees, with the money that they have to spend, can go and plug some holes, and I still think they're going to win the division.
All right, so
think that's
we have
fair.
3 different picks for the American League East.
And none of them are Baltimore.
And none of them could end up being right, because
With that, we are going to move on to the American League Central Division. Last year, you came to me, Tim, and said, what do you think about the Kansas City Royals to win the division? I really like them. I think that they're young, and people aren't expecting them. And my response was, I think the Detroit Tigers are the exact same thing that you're saying, but I felt stronger. And as the year went on, I saw the light from what you were saying. I even put a little bit on them to maybe make it to the World Series as a surprise team. I've become a huge fan of Bobby Witt Jr. They have a good manager. They have a good team. Their outfield's a little sketchy to me. They don't have those locked-in outfielders that a lot of other teams have, but they have a pretty nice young team. Good rotation. We saw Cole Reagans get a lot of attention in the postseason. He's who they got from the Texas Rangers for Aroldis Chapman, which helped the Rangers win a World Series, but now the Royals have a guy who could be a legitimate ace alongside Seth Lugo and Michael Wacha. So I'm taking the Kansas City Royals, even though I still think Cleveland, Detroit, and Minnesota are all dangerous. And when we get down to my wild cards, I don't know if I have anybody else from the AL Central even making the playoffs, even though I think any of those 3 could. But I am taking Kansas City. Tim, let's hear from you first this time.
you want to talk about we just talked about a division that was bunched up, and this is even more so.
Yes.
I mean, flip a coin. Twins, Tigers, Royals, Guardians. Any one of those teams could win the division.
Just not the White Sox.
Yeah, nobody has to worry about them. The White Sox don't stand a chance, and at plus 25,000, I wouldn't even put $10 on that. So I'm going to go with the Royals as well. We haven't gotten into this segment yet, but I'm always going to be talking about this. I took their team total wins again over 82.5. I like them a lot. Any one of these four teams could win. They are so close in numbers. The Twins are the odds-on favorite currently. I think the Guardians have regressed a little bit, but the Tigers are right there as well. Any one of these teams could win it, but I'm going to go with the Royals.
I don't like any of these teams. They're all flawed. I don't like the Royals offense. I don't necessarily like Cleveland's offense, but they have a tremendous bullpen. And when they get Shane Bieber back, and that's a big question, that'll help their pitching rotation. But until then, they're kind of thin in their pitching rotation. I don't think, regardless of what Detroit did in the last 2 months of the season, that they line up to put 88 wins up there and win a division. I mean, this division could be 85 or 86 wins. I just don't think... I'll tell you what's going to determine who wins the division is who beats the White Sox the most in that division. That's how that's going to work. So I will pick Kansas City as well, and the only reason I'm going to pick them is because I think their pitching rotation is a little bit deeper. It's not that deep. If they have an injury, they're in trouble. But I think their pitching rotation is a little better than the other teams in the league. The Tigers obviously at the top with Skubal and Flaherty if he's good, and we don't know if he's going to be good. And Reese Olson got hurt last year. He's a good pitcher, but he's not a dominant pitcher. I don't think there's a team that's head and shoulders in this division above the other. They all have their flaws, their different flaws. So I'll pick the Royals too, but it's just kind of because there isn't a better option.
I mean, the other thing that we can consider is that Minnesota last year kind of had the division on lockdown, and they blew it late. And I think if that doesn't happen, a lot of people still feel like they're the safe bet. Maybe Cleveland is. I still like Cleveland. I'm picking the Royals because of the kind of the flair, the upside. I think Cleveland's maybe the safest. Their manager's obviously good, even though it's not Tito Francona anymore. But I like Cleveland, but I'm still sticking with it. I'm taking Kansas City. As we move out west, it might be a changing of the guard, in my opinion. I'll tell you what, I'll let you guys go first instead of me taking the lead every time. The AL West, one of you guys, feel free to take it away.
The American League is interesting when I look at all the divisions because I'm looking at odds. That's what I'm looking at every time. And you have three teams, once again, literally right in the hunt for this division. The Astros, the Rangers, or the Mariners could win it. I don't think the Angels or the Athletics have a chance, although I think the Athletics are going to be more competitive this year than people think. I'm going to take the Rangers to win the division. The Astros and the Mariners, you've got plus 180 to win the division on the Astros, plus 190 to win their division for the Rangers, and plus 200 to win the division for the Mariners. So once again, flip a coin. I don't have any stats and players and things like that to back what I'm saying here, but I like the Rangers.
I'm going to pick the Rangers too. I think they've got a pretty good lineup with a lot of home run power, and if Jake DeGrom makes 20 to 25 starts for them, and Nathan Eovaldi is back. I'm not sure what they're going to do with John Gray. They were talking about moving him to the bullpen when spring training started, but he's listed as a starter for them. And but their pitching's pretty good. Their rotation is going to be very good if Jake DeGrom is healthy. And I've read some of comments from him where he's not going to try to throw 100 miles an hour this year. He's going to try to be around 97, 98, save some wear and tear. If he can make 25 starts for them, when he's healthy, he is the best pitcher in Major League Baseball. And that would be a huge difference for them. So I'll roll the dice that he makes 25 starts, and I will pick the Rangers.
I also am taking the Texas Rangers. They made me a bit of money a couple years ago on their World Series run.
By the way, one other thing. Sorry to interrupt. The Mariners have the best pitching rotation in baseball.
But they never add any offense to that
But they
team.
have no offense on that team, and that ballpark is one of the worst ballparks for offense in Major League Baseball. The ball just doesn't carry there. I've heard comments from players who've played there as visitors. Teoscar Hernandez, who played there before he was with the Dodgers, has talked recently about how hard it is to hit the ball out of that ballpark, and that the hitter's background is weird too. So, their pitching is outstanding, but they just don't score any runs.
Yeah, and I was looking at them in the wild card conversation as well. Like I said, I'm taking Texas. A couple years ago, they were really good. Last year, they had a whole bunch of injuries. Obviously, that derailed their season. They've retooled a little. They moved on from Nate Lowe, who's had a lot of health issues the last few years. Got Jake Berger. They added Jock Peterson. There are some questions about Adolis Garcia, although he says he's good. I think if that team stays healthy, they have a great rotation. They have a pretty good bullpen. They've got a great Hall of Fame manager and a fantastic lineup. So I think the Rangers get back to what they were doing a couple years ago. I don't think Houston or Seattle are necessarily out of it, but I really like them for the division. So to recap our division winners in the East, we each had someone different than the AL. We each had someone different for the East. I had Boston. Marc had Toronto. Tim had the Yankees. We all had Kansas City and Texas as well. Take a quick time out here as we regroup for the wild card. And I think this is tougher than the divisions because, like I said earlier, MLB's getting exactly what they wanted. Everybody seems to be in it except for the bottom couple of teams. And I had a really hard time picking who's going to make it and who's not. I'm not even settled on my third wild card, honestly. I picked them, but I don't know. I just really don't know. I might change it before we even get to the segment because I'm having a hard time with it. We'll see if you guys have this hard time as I do. This is StraussNet Sports Radio Spring Training Edition, Baseball Preview. Welcome back to StraussNet Sports Radio. We are predicting the American League. We've done the divisions. Boston, Toronto, and New York for the three of us. Tim had New York. Marc had Toronto. I took Boston. We all took Kansas City and Texas. So it's on to the wild card. And as I've mentioned repeatedly, this is exactly what MLB wanted. It was really hard for me. I actually wrote down my predictions before we did the show, but I have been swayed, and I changed a couple of them. So we're going to do 3 wild cards for each of us, and up to 3 bubble teams you think can screw up our predictions entirely. So we've talked about a lot of teams that are like, well, they could make it. 3 of those teams. But we'll start with the 3 wild card. We'll go around with that, and then we'll go back around for the bubble team. So I'm going to say the Yankees still get in. I took Boston. I think the Yankees, even though they're having trouble, I think the Yankees will still get in. I've mentioned repeatedly which of these teams' general managers are willing to go out and spend or trade to fix problems, or who's going to stand pat. We talked about how Seattle was a question mark because will they go do anything for their offense ever? The Yankees are going to spend. If Garrett Cole's done for the year, you bet they're going to be looking for ways to fill that. They've already got Marcus Stroman, who might have been in the bullpen. He comes in for Luis Heel. Now it's a matter of, do they let any of their prospects pitch? Do you sign a Kyle Gibson? Do you trade for someone else? I think the Yankees will be fine in terms of making the playoffs. My second is going to be Houston. I know they got, I don't want to say got worse, even though they probably did. They're falling. They don't have Bregman. They did sign Christian Walker, who's I heard is a little banged up. Trading Kyle Tucker is going to hurt. They're not going to have Verlander coming back and bailing him out this year. But I still think the Houston Astros have what it takes to make a playoff push. I always like to say with these teams that make the playoffs repeatedly, you bet on them until you can't bet on them anymore. And until they don't make the playoffs, I've still got to loop them in. And I had Baltimore here, but I'm putting Toronto in my third wild card. You both have convinced me. Pitching wins playoff games and playoff positioning. Baltimore doesn't have enough pitching. And Toronto, I even reminded myself, Toronto tried to get a bunch of these free agents. They were in on a lot of these guys. They were in on Yamamoto. They were in on Sasaki. They were in on Ohtani. They didn't get any, but guess what? You can trade for people. So as long as I don't trade away Vlad Guerrero, who is going to be a free agent, he has said it at this point, they have a good offense. They have some good pitching. If Max Scherzer's healthy, they've got Barrios. They've got Bassett and Gausman. I'll say it was slipping my tongue.
You're
Gausman.
talking right there. You're talking about
that's a great rotation.
Minus Scherzer, Bassett, Gausman, and Barrios are all going to give you 180 innings at least.
So I didn't take them for my division, but I am putting them in. So I've got the Yankees, the Astros, and Toronto competing for the wild card this year. What do you got?
I'm going to go with the Yankees, the Astros, and the Tigers. Because one of the wild card teams is going to come from the American League Central because they get to play the White Sox so many times. Not as much as they used to with the interleague play every day, but it has a bearing on the record. And if you get to play a team that essentially might not be able to win 70 games in AAA, you have a big advantage. And you get to play them 4 series, and the teams in the other divisions only get to play them 2 series.
Well, and for all intents and purposes, last year we actually saw everybody in the AL Central besides the White Sox as a playoff type team.
Yeah.
You had Cleveland, you had Detroit, you had Kansas City,
Yeah.
and the Twins had a late season collapse due to some injuries. They were going to be in the playoffs. So all 4 of those teams were playoff caliber teams last year.
Well, they were playoff teams because they played
of
the White Sox so many times. And, you could say the same thing about the A's, but you can't, because there's a big difference between a team that wins 68 or 70 games and a team that wins 41 games.
Well, something you said to me last year was the Oakland A's are a major league team. They have major league players. They're not using spare parts. They're maybe using some guys who are a little out of their depth in terms of being played too much, or they're still young. But they added. It's a lot like the AL East used to be, where it was Detroit, New York, and Boston. Because Baltimore didn't spend, Tampa used to not spend, and Toronto would spend some. So yeah, the AL Central is going to be interesting. I couldn't take them over who I took. I just think they're going to be too good at teams. But I don't think you're wrong. Tim, what are you looking at here?
My wild card teams are the Boston Red Sox, the Minnesota Twins, and the Houston Astros.
I do want to specify. In years past, I've told these guys I want the ranking, like where they're going to finish in the wild card.
I don't think that's possible.
We're throwing that out.
Yeah.
We've tried that before, and it was completely useless. So this is just combine them any which way. So you said Boston, Minnesota, Houston.
Yes, and you literally could mix and match 12 teams here and be right or wrong on any of them.
Well, on that note, the bubble teams, Tim, who are you looking at who could screw up our rankings? Teams you did not select to make the playoffs, but you could easily see making the playoffs.
Well, I would not have said this coming in, but the Toronto Blue Jays, you've convinced me, and let's just put it this way, at the beginning of the season, I will now be a Toronto Blue Jays fan. I promise you.
His wallet depends on it.
Yep. The Detroit Tigers, because the Central Division, any one of those teams could come out of there. And with that, I'm going to say the Guardians, because of the Central Division and because every single year they just seem to put out a decent team even when you think they're not going to.
That's a good segue into my bubble teams because I have Cleveland. I had a really hard time not putting them in the playoffs. Cleveland, Baltimore, and Seattle. I feel like this. You're all right about the Seattle rotation, and Tim and I were talking about the Cleveland, the under in games, not under in wins, but runs scored in games, because guys have a hard time hitting there and the rotation and all that. So I could easily see Seattle pushing, and I don't really want to take Baltimore out entirely. They've just been so good. I don't think they're good enough to be a playoff team because of the pitching. I think they'll make a move, but I just think it'll be too little too late. So I've got Cleveland, Baltimore, and Seattle. Who are a couple of teams that you like that you don't think are necessarily playoff teams but could?
Boston, Baltimore. Do we have to pick 3?
No. I know you like Cincinnati.
Oh, no, I'm talking about in the American League.
Yeah, oh, that's true. That's true. I'm
just Boston and Baltimore.
Boston, Baltimore. Yeah. All right.
If I had to go with a third one, I can't think of it. I don't like any of the other teams.
Not even Seattle.
They don't have any offense.
That's fair. Well, that's the point of the bubble. Sometimes we have NCAA basketball coming up. Sometimes everybody in college basketball is on the bubble, and sometimes it's one team that just doesn't make it that should have been in. So we all think Cleveland, Baltimore.
Seattle will lead the league in quality starts. That's the only thing I would say about Seattle. I'm not picking them. I'm just saying. That's their strong suit.
I'm going to write that down. Seattle will lead the league in quality starts.
They're gonna, all of those pitchers. Well, 4 of them are gonna give you 20 to 28 quality starts. Logan Gilbert last year led the American League in quality starts. I think he actually led Major League Baseball in quality starts.
All right, so I have so much writing here now, and I will have to make sure I can decipher my own notes. But we have our division winners. It seems like we all have the Yankees in somewhere. Tim and I are reversed on Boston and New York. I have him win the division. He has him in the hunt, in the wild card. We all did pick Houston to make it, so we all kind of feel the same way. Toronto's a team that we can kind of highlight as what are they going to be this year. They look like they've made some additions. It's hard for us to put Cleveland away. Yeah, moral story is we like Boston, Toronto, and the Yankees. Kansas City, Texas, Houston. I think we've talked a lot about Detroit. But yeah, now I'm going to make it hard for you. Who do you think's winning this? Who's winning the pennant? That silence is deafening, ladies and gentlemen.
I have no idea.
I have no clue. No, I mean, and honestly, like there are.
I'll pick the Blue Jays just because they're probably the team that I feel strongest about of any of these division winners. But Texas could too.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a quality club. If everybody stays healthy on Texas and Marcus Semien has a bounce back year, and Wyatt Langford continues to progress. I know he was a little bit of a disappointment last year. And Adolis Garcia walks a few more times and strikes out a few less times. It could be Texas, but I'll just go with Toronto since I have to pick one.
There are literally 10 different teams that could win the pennant, in my opinion, in this. My dart throw is going to be, just because we have to give you one, Texas Rangers.
All right, so we all three have different pennant winners. You know what? I'll just differ from you guys. I'll take my Boston Red Sox, my second favorite, my AL team. I feel like every time they make some good vibe moves, you can just feel it in Boston. They add Crochet, they added Bregman. If they can get this Devers being a little frustrated about whether he's going to play third base. I also like the prospects, Christian Campbell, Roman Anthony, Marcelo Meyer. If they can keep their pitching healthy, because they've shown that they can hit the last few years, but they finally have some pitching. If they can keep the pitching healthy, they're as good as anyone, in my opinion, in the AL. So I'm going to take Boston. You took Toronto. Tim took Texas. And I think we're going to see the contrast over to the National League here momentarily, because we've talked about all these American League teams. Boston, Toronto, the Yankees, Texas. We all like Kansas City, even though we don't think they're necessarily a pennant contender. Houston. All these teams are on a very similar level. In the National League, when we transition here in a few moments, we're going to take a quick timeout. But the National League, you'll see there's a few teams at the top. There's a few teams probably in the middle. And then there's everybody else who are all bubble teams. So we'll be right back for the National League on StraussNet Sports Radio. We are back on StraussNet Sports Radio. We did the American League, and it was just really hard to pick. A lot of good teams over there. In the National League, things are a little more obvious, in my opinion. We're going to go right through the divisions again. We'll do wild cards, and then we'll give you some bubble teams. My bubble teams aren't necessarily just to be wild card, because there's a couple of division situations going on where I don't know what's going to happen there. But let's start all the way from the top. National League East, I think the Mets are going to win this division. All due respect to the Phillies and the Braves, who I do still have in the playoffs, and we'll get to that. But I think that what the Mets have done, they had a really nice end of the season. They go out, they add Juan Soto. The Mets, remember, when Steve Cohen took over a few years ago, they went and made that super team that lost in the wild card round. And then they kind of backtracked. They said, you know what, let's make it more organically, and then we'll add. Kind of what the Cardinals are claiming they're doing. But they took it back a step, but they didn't get rid of everyone. They were able to keep Pete Alonso. They go out and they get Juan Soto, and I just think the Mets have a really good shot to strike now, and they will take the National League East. I almost said American League. The National League. So I have the Mets. Meet the Mets.
I'm going to go with the Phillies. They have a really nice ball club. They got Jesus Luzardo in the offseason to add to their rotation. He's a good pitcher. He's been with Miami for his whole career. Well, I shouldn't say that. He actually started in Oakland, but he's been in Miami more recently. And now he's back on a good team, and he's more mature. They're going to lead off Trey Turner this year. They've talked about that, so I expect he'll run more. Bryce Harper, if he stays healthy, if he plays 145 games, if he can, he'll play 162. That's just Bryce Harper. I'm gonna go with the Phillies. I still think they have the best team. They have a tremendous rotation. They have a good bullpen, and I still think they're the best team in that division.
Tim, what say you?
This is another division that's just like all the American League divisions where you have three teams, the Atlanta Braves, the Philadelphia Phillies, or the New York Mets that could win it. Don't think the Mets are going to win it because the Mets are the Mets, and they're just one of those teams that just seems to, they could have it all together, they could have the best team on paper, and in some way, shape, or form, it's just not going to happen.
Usually with them, someone important gets hurt, and
yeah.
it just ruins it.
It's just...
Well, that actually has happened. They lost their catcher, Francisco Alvarez, for 2 months.
Yeah, that's a big one. So I can't feel confident in taking them. The Phillies and the Braves are both very, very, very good. I think whichever one of them wins the division, the other one will still be in the playoffs as a wild card team.
Agree with that, yes.
And I'm going to take the Atlanta Braves.
I think all three of those teams make the playoffs.
I would agree with that.
The National League is going to be much easier to pick.
So you like the Braves better than the Phillies?
I do.
Now, here's my only problem with the Braves, because I kind of said the same thing about the Braves as I did with Houston. They lost Max Fried. I'm not going to bet against them, but their rotation just scares me a little. They've got Sale. Ronaldo Lopez was an all-star for the first time, but what does their rotation look like? They do have a really good bullpen, and I think their lineup's going to be fine, but their rotation just scares me a little.
Sean Murphy also, he's out for a couple of months.
Yes, but
their catcher.
They don't have Darnold anymore either, so it's not like they can just go back and forth like they used to. But I don't think you're wrong about the Braves either. It's a good representation.
Well,
we each have one of these three teams, and we all probably think they're both going to make the playoffs.
Just remember that the Braves used to carry Henry Blanco and Paul Bacco and guys like that to catch Greg Maddux. The catcher on the Braves only has to do a great job of handling the pitchers. That's just historically what they do. The rest of the lineup is still pretty good.
Now, I'm going to make a prediction.
Ronald Acuna Jr. should be able to play at least 5 of the 6 months this year.
I'm going to make a prediction about the NL Central. It's that we all three have the same team. I am taking, unfortunately, the Chicago Cubs. I've talked about this. I feel like they have... Honestly, it's not even what everybody else thinks. They add Kyle Tucker, which is a huge move. I wasn't a huge fan of them subtracting Bellinger. They're trying to play within their budget, so you give some, you take some. But they add Tucker, but I think the pitching is what sets them apart for me. They finally have a closer in Ryan Presley, who I've been a big fan of for years. They have Senga, that's the Mets one. They have Imanaga and Justin Steele. They are the only team in this division, in my opinion, who really have that 1-2 punch of starting pitchers. So I'm taking, unfortunately, the Chicago Cubs. Now, here's my caveat. The Brewers seem to have the same devil magic the Cardinals used to, where no matter what team they have a chance at this division. Some of that might be because of the rest of the division. I do not have the Brewers making the playoffs, nor are they one of my bubble teams. I think the bubble pops for them. I am going to be a homer and say I think the Cardinals have a shot to win this division if everything goes right. They have some starting pitching. They have some young starting pitching coming. They still have some decent bullpen options. They did not trade Ryan Helsley. I think, now follow me on this, Wilson Contreras for a full season is better than the version of Paul Goldschmidt we saw a year ago. I don't think he's better than Paul Goldschmidt overall, but the offense we did not get from Goldschmidt and Arenado, I think we will get from Contreras and a refocused Arenado. If they get rid of Arenado, Cardinals are done. But then you're talking about, does Nootbaar stay healthy? Can you get more out of Jordan Walker? Victor Scott looks improved. So if the Cardinals have everything come together, they could be better than the Cubs. So I will tell you now, the Cardinals are one of my bubble teams, but they have to win the division. They're not going to make the wild card. But on the level right now, Cubs are my division winner.
I'm picking the Cubs too. They were active in the off season. Yeah, they let Bellinger go, but they brought in Kyle Tucker. Even if it's only for this year, we're going to get to see Matt Shaw, who's one of their top prospects, if not their top offensive prospect. The third base job is his to lose. He's looked very good in spring training. Pete Crow Armstrong's having an incredible spring training.
People on Twitter are talking about, does he ever score on a ball that's caught? Because he's always scoring on these balls that are getting away.
But he's been really good. He was good at the end of last year. Again, I agree with you on Imanaga and Justin Steele. They're better than anybody else in the division. I don't think they're going to have any trouble winning the division. I think they'll win it by at least 5 games. It's not a great division. So, yeah, Cubs.
And for Tim, which I kind of know where this is going because I've seen the numbers on the Cubs.
Yeah, it's these are the next 2 divisions that we're going to talk about. The decision for me is extremely easy. This isn't a hard one. The Cubs, hands down. I'll have some more information when we get to the betting side of this with them. But I don't think anyone's going to come close.
What's the over-under on wins for them?
It's now 86.5.
What was it?
I'd go over on that.
I got it at 85.5.
Yeah, we'll talk about this in the over under win totals category. But
I just brought it up because I don't participate in that part of the broadcast.
That was something we immediately I think both of us were like, okay, I want to know the Royals and I want to know the Cubs.
Well, I told you last year take the over on the Cubs, and they
did it.
They beat it.
Yeah.
Did you take it?
Last year, I don't think so.
Okay.
Now, is anybody not picking the Dodgers? Do you just want to make this simple?
Yeah, if the Dodgers are going to win that division.
Yeah.
And the Padres are going to be a wild card team.
I was going to say, this is a perfect transition into the wild card. We all have the Dodgers. Yeah. We all know why.
And the Mets and the Braves.
So you say San Diego, Mets,
and Braves.
Because
I picked the Phillies in the East. And I'm going to guess that you guys are going to do the same thing.
Yes. I have Phillies, Padres, and Atlanta. And so you have... you had Atlanta, so you have
Phillies,
Philly.
Mets, and Padres. Yep.
Mets
now,
and Padres.
I think if one of those
Arizona
teams,
could.
If one of those, that's where I was going. If one of those teams has an injury or they're a disappointment, then Arizona gets in.
So
but
that's
everybody else in the National League. I don't really see Hi, Eli.
Our furry co-host.
Yeah.
Usually you hear my furry co-hosts, Kit Kat and Luna. Today we have the not-so-noisy furry co-host, Eli. Arizona, we have a buddy at work who's from there, and he's really high on them. They got Corbin Burns. Corbin Carroll was clearly hurt for some of last year.
He's having a good spring training.
They have a really nice rotation. I had a hard time. I almost picked them over Atlanta because I like the rotation better. But I have Arizona. I'm guessing you have Arizona as a bubble team as well.
Yes.
Yes.
There's not a lot of bubble team candidates.
Arizona is my top bubble team, and honestly, my only bubble team. Maybe Milwaukee or Cincinnati if they totally surprise, because Milwaukee always has this. They're like Cleveland.
That's what
where
I was
you
saying,
don't
yeah.
expect them to do anything, and they had this great baseball team. Good for them, but Arizona. That's it. That's my only bubble team I got.
Does anybody else stand out
Nobody
to you?
else stands a
Cincinnati.
chance.
I go Arizona, Cincinnati.
I already told you my feeling on the Cardinals, that they could be not a wild card bubble, but if the Cubs have something go wrong and the Cardinals have something go right, I think there is a path because of that division. But honestly, here's my really dark horse. I kind of like what the Giants have done the last few years, and there's something that makes me think they can be competitive. I don't know if they're going to make the playoffs. They're my last bubble team of all of it. But I think the Giants have a shot, maybe a little more next year. But yeah, so our National League is pretty much, I think we have all the same teams, just in different spots. We all have the Mets. We all have Philly in somewhere. We all have Atlanta in somewhere. We all have the Cubs and the Dodgers win the division, and we all have San Diego in. So, and we all have Arizona as our number one bubble team. So, and we all like Cincinnati. I didn't list them as a bubble team, but Terry Francona is going to make a difference in Cincinnati too.
The National League is way easier than the American League, hands down.
Yeah. Now, in the American League, I said, who's your pennant winner? And we all didn't really know. We had Boston, Toronto, and Texas. Are we picking someone besides L.A. to win the National League?
No,
Nope.
I'm not.
No, we still think the Dodgers.
Well, because look at what they can do with you in a playoff series. It's obvious. Look, it's obvious what they're doing with Ohtani. He's not going to pitch for like the first month or two. So they don't need him until October on the pitcher's mound. So I think what they're going to do is they're going to slow play him, make sure they don't overexpose him and overwork his body. He'll still play in the field every day because they want his bat in the field every day. They don't want to injure him where he can't play. And then you can add him to your rotation later in the year and have him ready to go in October. And then you add him to Yamamoto.
I was going to say, for those playing at home, Yamamoto, Snell, Glasnow, Sasaki. Their list, Gonsolin is going to be ready to go, but they also have Dustin May. Kershaw just re-signed. I don't know how long it'll take him.
Glasnow will give him 100 innings. I think last year he had 130 innings, and I think that's almost the most innings he's ever pitched. So he's never going to get you 150 or 180 innings. But if they go with a six-man rotation and keep the wear and tear off, which they can do, and these 26-man rosters now make it possible. And the Dodgers always carry guys who have multi-positional eligibility.
Long live Kike Hernandez.
Well, I mean, Tommy Edman plays.
That's true, and they have Chris Taylor.
Tommy Edman plays 4 or 5 positions.
And so does Mookie Betts, who will be the shortstop.
Right.
Because
To start
they
the
added
year.
Michael Conforto.
Yeah.
I'm kind of surprised I forgot they signed Hee-Song Kim, not Ha-Song Kim.
No.
Where is Ha-Song Kim? He's not in San Diego. Ha-Song Kim is in Tampa.
That's what I thought.
Hee-Song Kim is now in the Dodgers. Yeah, so their projected lineup is Ohtani, Betts at shortstop, Freeman at first, Teoscar Hernandez in right, Muncy is at third, Will Smith is at catcher, Conforto in left, Edman in center, and Kim at second. They still have Barnes, Rojas, Taylor, and Kike. with that crazy rotation. Now, their bullpen is a little banged up. Evan Phillips is having rotator issues. Michael Kopech has inflammation, but they haven't said that he's out or anything. But they added Tanner Scott, they added Kirby Yates, they still have Blake Trinan, they still have Alex Vesia.
When everybody's healthy, they have 5 people who've closed.
Yeah. So their team is wild. This will make a great transition into our next segment. I am going to take a quick break, but Tim said his teaser for the baseball season was, I'm going to put a house payment on the Dodgers to win the whole thing again. So we're going to find out what Tim and I did and then get the baseball but non-bettors thoughts on that from Marc when we come back on StraussNet Sports Radio. Welcome back to StraussNet Sports Radio. We have told you about the divisions. We have told you about the wild cards. The American League seems wide open. We don't even know who the American League pennant winner is, and anybody that's been mentioned seems to be capable of doing it. The National League was pretty much a consensus that we all liked the Dodgers. So with that, Tim and I are going to carry on for the next segment into the magical realm of sports betting. And what we are going to tell you, we are not sponsored. We do not have any money coming into the show. We are not, we use certain betting sites and we will be referencing them, but they are not sponsored. They do not even know that we use them. I generally will look at FanDuel. It is a sports book at our local casino here, and I have the ability just to walk in and do it. Tim has a website that he likes to look at. He also goes to a casino in Iowa that has its own sports book and sometimes some unique numbers. I don't have the numbers for, I'm just not going to pull up DraftKings or like Circa, just so we're not going to get convoluted. But we are not sponsored. We use FanDuel and a couple other websites. Just Yahoo uses BetMGM, so that's always my qualifier. We also do not condone betting if you are in any sort of dire straits. This is all for fun. Tim has he has money. If I buy hats and jerseys, and I have separate money for that, so I'm not getting into my bills. Tim has separate money for his betting. I put like $20 on stuff. He puts more on it sometimes. So anything we say anecdotally, we do not expect anyone to run out and do anything. We are not official betting experts, and even the experts you shouldn't always listen to. Do it as smart for you and responsible. With that, let's talk about some irresponsible sports betting. The first things first, it is Christmas when we get the over-under on win totals every year, and some numbers stuck out to me and Tim. Real quick, what I did, I think I put a grand total of like $50 on the baseball season. I took, at FanDuel, Kansas City's over-under win total was 82.5, and I thought, even if they don't make the playoffs, I think they can do that. So I put 30 on that at plus 104. It was a plus number to take the over. And that stood out, Tim, because on your sites, and I don't know what it was on DraftKings or MGM, but every other website had the Royals over as a minus number. So the plus was a really good number.
That's one of the things that stood out to me with FanDuel's number at the over at plus 104, because sites that I were looking at had them at like minus 120, and it was juiced to the over. 82.5 was the number that stuck out to me, but then it's not necessarily all about that. It's about the price you can get. And so to me, plus 104 was extremely good value in Kansas City at winning 83 games.
And we'll do a quick Tim's vocabulary for you, because I always confuse myself. It's taken me, we've known each other since 2017. We've started talking sports betting in 2019 when you and I went to Blues games. One of my favorite terms he uses is juice. And let's see if I remember how this works. If I'm betting plus 104, so if I spend $100, I will get 104. The 4 is the juice, if I'm correct.
So basically how it works is that you're the most common thing you're going to see when you're taking a point spread of, like, let's say a team is -7, the other team's going to be +7, and they're both going to be -110. Because ultimately a casino wants the same amount of money on each side.
So they don't lose anything.
Because at -110, basically you're betting $1.10 to win $1, or $110 to win $100. Well, if you have the same amount on both sides, the casino is basically going to pay the $1 million. Let's say they have $1.1 million bet on both sides. So whoever wins is going to win $1 million. So they take the 1.1 million they have on this side, and they pay the $1 million, and they put $100,000 in their pocket. That's what the juice is for, and that's where it's at. And on a bet like that's plus 104, every dollar pays you $1.04. So those numbers fluctuate depending on where the money is going and who's betting where. And so you're going to see a better number at plus 104. Basically what that's telling you is that casino or that site is getting so much money bet on the under that it's at minus 125, meaning, okay, if you want to keep taking the under, you're going to have to pay a lot for it because we're trying to even things out. So we're going to give you a better number at plus 104 because we want you to take that.
A lot of people are buying this vacuum cleaner, but not this one. So we're going to put this one on sale to make some money on it. So the juice is that extra bit where the 110, the 10, or the 4, whatever makes it uneven, or is the juice, and it is juiced in a direction generally to help the casino even things out. And like I said, all the Kansas City numbers were minus everywhere, whereas at FanDuel, it was plus. So I also added to that and took the Royals to win their division for $10 at plus 310, figuring, and we talked about this in the first segment, any of those teams can win. I just like the Royals. I felt like, and I'm going to come back to it, the Royals over-under number was so nice that I think they can do it even if they do nothing else, and it'll cover the rest of my bets. My third bet, we talked about the Cardinals. I went in depth, and this was why. It wasn't so much to say, oh, I think they're making the playoffs and you guys are underestimating them. No, it's for this reason. The Cardinals were plus 1,000 to win the division. This is my literal text to Tim. I took St. Louis to win the NL Central for $10 at plus 1,000 because why the hell not? That's a great number at plus 1,000 in a division that should be more wide open than the betting is saying it is. Yes, we all think the Cubs are going to win it. But for $10, I'll even shoot over here and tell you what they are right now. The NL Central, Cubs are minus 105, Brewers plus 290, Reds are plus 490, Cardinals are up to plus 850, and the Pirates are plus 1,000. So if you're looking at a bet where it really is it's a bet. It's for fun. It's not that I think this is necessarily going to happen, but for $10 to win 100, I think that's a pretty nice bet to have there, and it's not going to hurt me to take it. My final bet was I took the Red Sox to win the AL East at plus 440 for $10 as well. So like I said, $50, $30 on the Royals to over-under, and $10 on each of the other things. I do think the Red Sox are going to win this division, especially today after all the Yankee injuries. So that's all I took. I put a little $50 down to have some fun with the season. I agree on a lot of the other stuff we talked about, but I'm going to let Tim take over and tell us some of the other things that really stood out to him on the over-under wins. And then there were some notes I took in our first segment about teams we talked about that even you added to your mental notes about, I might have to go back and do this. So, Tim, what do you got for me?
Yeah, so one of the reasons why I always love this podcast every year is it gives me more insight on things. I'm always looking for information because that's what, when you're looking to place a wager on something, it's all about information. I am in no, I'm not condoning this. I'm not an expert. One thing I will say is that the most important thing is I'm never putting any amount of money. I'm not going to talk about amounts here on this podcast on how much I put on things. But I'm never betting something that I can't lose. I'm never betting any amount of money that's going to change my life and how I live it in any way, shape, or form, because that would be irresponsible and wouldn't make any sense.
I'm going to add this to it. You and I do this in different styles. I do this for fun. Like, I'll call you out of the blue and go, hey, what's the over-under on this game? Or what's the win total on this? Or what is these guys to win the division? I'm dart throwing for fun, like someone going to a slot machine at a restaurant after dinner. You are running it like a business and have a systematic way of approaching it where you can have a night where you just get sledgehammered, but the next day things are kind of back to normal because everything's going to even out. It's like playing the stock market. If you stick with it every single day, that is systematic sports betting, as opposed to I'm not going to walk in and go, all right, let's put $1,000 on the Cardinals to win the division at plus 1,000 and see if I can make myself rich. That's not something I'm going to do. I'm doing it for fun. So when we talk sports betting, I also like to clarify we're doing different things with it, but the information is the same. So like I mentioned, that Royals number being almost too good to be true, in my opinion. As someone who systematically sports bets, Tim saying, hey, what about this? Me, the casual sports bettor, going, wow, that's when you really know. Put a highlighter on it.
I look at it as an investment. One of the reasons why I love futures plays, a lot of people don't want their money tied up for that long, but I actually think it's fantastic because I've actually done extremely well with futures bets in every sport and have consistently been making money on it every year. I look at it as a long-term investment. So it's fun. It actually gives a whole new twist to the season. You don't really even need to, when you place some futures bets, I've realized you don't necessarily even need to bet daily. I do when I see plays on a regular basis that makes sense. I will put a small amount on something almost every day. But the futures wagers, I've actually learned to it just puts a whole new twist on the season, gives you something to root for all year long, and it's a blast.
It's like I tell you about fantasy. You'll ask me, why are you into this team this year? Like, well, I like 2 years ago, I went to Texas and I enjoy it. So like, I'm kind of a fan of the Rangers for this season because I'm still like obviously a bigger Cardinal fan, but it gives me something to look forward to that. Or I have this player in fantasy, so I like these guys. I've had Trey Turner before. I'm not a Philly fan, but I really liked Trey Turner because I had him for a season. Tim is rooting hardcore for like the Kansas City Royals because he wanted them to do well last year. It's going to be really fun watching you deal with the Cubs this year.
Yeah, this is an interesting season for me. I've been doing this long enough now. At one point in time, there were certain things that I wouldn't ever do, like bet against my own team or take teams that I despise because I couldn't take my heart out of it. Now I've learned that I'm such an investor with what I do that I basically am looking at numbers and I am taking what I think is the best investment. So I'm willing to do things now at this point that I wasn't able to do before. And leading into that, I took the Kansas City Royals. I will admit that I was disappointed. I missed the plus 104 number because that was taken to the point to where I did not get the Kansas City Royal. I wanted to kind of see how things would go and how things would move because movement on numbers actually does make a difference. I also wanted to be able to go to Iowa and see what they had there because they won't give me that information over the phone and I have no way to look it up. So I have to physically go there to get the numbers that I need.
They are independent of any of the major sports books at Rhythm City Casino in Iowa. Was that Bettendorf?
No, it's in Davenport.
That's in Davenport. What's in Bettendorf? Was that a different
There's
one?
an Isle of Capri there, I believe. Something of that nature.
But this casino is not necessarily... The Rhythm City is not necessarily affiliated with anyone in particular at the moment. Doesn't mean it won't be. But they make their own numbers. So when Tim and I will look a whole bunch of stuff up, and then he's like, I need to go up to Iowa and see what is up there. Because sometimes it's better, sometimes it's not.
Well, so I did not go out immediately and take the plus 104. But it ultimately was the best number. I did take the Kansas City Royals to win 83 games. I took the over 82.5. I got it at minus 104, which is still a fantastic number because that number moved after I was done and placed the wager I made.
You said it was minus 104?
It was minus 104. I moved the number to minus 110. It's at minus 110, minus 115 in some places.
For
minus
those
120.
scoring at home, that means that he put a nice chunk of change on it, enough to move the number from 4 to 10.
Yeah. So I'm still happy with what I got. I still think it's a good bet. I think it's a good bet at minus 120 if that's all you can get. But the one I'm the most confident on, I've actually only taken a couple things so far. That will change. Today, my eyes were open to quite a few different things, which I'll get into. But the one that I honestly feel the most confident about, and I'm very glad that I took the trip to Iowa for, is I was able to get the Cubs team total wins at over 85.5 at minus 115. Minus 120 up there. That number doesn't even exist anymore. It's 86.5 wins everywhere that you look at this point. I also took the Cubs to win the division. I was able to get it at a plus 100, which is even money. And it's minus 105 to minus 115 anywhere that you would look now. So I was able to get the better numbers. I have a father and a grandfather who are rolling over in their graves that I am going to now be rooting for the Cubs to win the division and to play good baseball this year. I have another grandfather that's given me an attaboy, though, so there's that. I am a diehard Cardinals fan. I am totally disappointed in what they've been doing over the last few years. I'm not happy with the organization. So I will admit they made it a lot easier for me to put money on the Cubs. I think they're hands down going to win the division and win 86 or more games, and it's my best bet for the season, to be honest.
A quick aside, we did mention the Cardinals. I had a lot of really strong thoughts. I kind of mentioned it in my Super Bowl show as I previewed spring, but I'll touch on it again. They came out of last year. They came out 2 years ago with one of their worst records ever. And they said, well, we're going to add some legitimate starting pitching. They went and got Sonny Gray, Lance Lynn, and Kyle Gibson. And a lot of fans wish we went back out and got Kyle Gibson to go with Sonny Gray this year and made mediocre moves. And last year they had a good season, all things considered. They were 10 wins better than 2023. But it just wasn't enough for the playoffs. They traded away Tommy Edman to try to get Eric Fetty. It wasn't quite enough to win a wild card spot of the division. They faltered late. And a lot of people said, if we add a couple of things, we can go to the playoffs next year. And instead, they said, we're going to transition. They have John Mozeliak leaving, Chaim Bloom coming in, and they felt like, well, if we let our young players play and don't worry about taking them out when they're not doing well because we have to win games, we'll be a better team in the long run. I don't know how much runway some of these guys need. I have no problem with that. I still think you can play everyone. But their solution, that we were like, okay, so play the young guys, yeah. And to do that, we have to trade Contreras, Gray, and Nolan Arenado and let Paul Goldschmidt walk. And a lot of us were like, I understand Goldschmidt because he was at the end of his contract and they decided not to renew it, even though I think they should have brought him back. But why do you have to get rid of the other guys? And there was this whole offseason where Contreras and Gray said, no, we're not going anywhere. And Arenado said, only if it's to a winning team. He even specified in spring training that he never asked to be traded. He just said, look, if you guys are really going to try to trade me, I would like to go win somewhere. But he also said last year he wasn't focused. He was dealing with some back issues, whether he admits it or not. You can tell by how he moved. He wasn't free moving. And then he talked about how he put so much pressure on himself, but he's rededicated himself to, quick twitch muscles and speeding his swing up, and also mentoring. And at the end of the year last year, he said he kind of just forgot about when they were out of the playoff race. He said he kind of dedicated himself to mentoring, and he really liked it, and it kind of freed him up. So I think he's going to have a really good year, and it's weird because I'm really, really frustrated, as is Tim, about how the Cardinals have decided, no, we don't have to spend anything. In fact, we're going to try to save some money. We're not even going to try to get prospects. We're going to trade people for cash that we're not going to spend. And it's just ridiculous. So I'm mad about that. But I think if you separate the off-season vibes in the front office and look at the messaging in spring training from the coaches and the actual players, I'm excited about that because they have talked about how they don't like that people don't think they're good enough. They don't like that they weren't good enough last year, and in some cases the year before. There's a lot of players on the team, Mason Wynn, Brendan Donovan, Lars Nootbaar, who are talking about, hey, we need to prove everyone wrong. And while I'm at the front office, I'm really excited to see what the team itself can do. So I put a really cheap dart throw bet on them. I'm not betting on them in a big sense, but it could be an interesting season, or it could also be a complete nuclear bomb that fractures this franchise for the next 5 to 7 years.
Don't get me wrong when I talk about all this hype with the Cubs. If it comes down to it at the end of the season, I'm not going to root for the Cubs over the Cardinals if they're battling for the division. I just don't see any other team competing for that division this year. And from the Cardinals have always been the Cardinals. They've always been surprising in past years. They've always done what people didn't expect them to do. They've always just been that team that's been there. That hasn't been the case recently. If the young guys can show up and produce more, then yeah, they could be a surprise this year. Going on sticking with the betting, concept of what we're talking about here. There are a lot of other things that have, opened up to me. I'm kind of looking to see if there are other things that I'm going to do. My team total wins wagers that I make are usually larger.
Now, you said you had Kansas City, the Cubs, and did you have a third one, or was it just Kansas City, Cubs, and Cubs division was the only thing you've taken?
That's the only thing I've taken so far. I am looking at taking there are others that I'm considering. I don't see how the White Sox are going to win 55 games this year. People were on the over at 53.5 to move it to 54.5. I just don't see it.
It's 54.5 right now.
It's 54.5 at the moment. I miss the Yankees, but who knew they were going to get hurt? That moved from like 92.5, 93.5 down to 88.5.
Yeah.
So I'm staying away from that because you have to know when you've missed something, and I missed the good number. So how was I supposed to know that? The Padres at 85.5 wins. I like the over. Don't know if I'm going to do it yet. The Toronto Blue Jays are now something after today that I'm very, very much looking at. Their team total wins is 78.5.
I think they can win 80 games.
It's juiced to minus 140, which is a lot.
Yeah,
at the over 78.5.
That means everyone agrees that they're better than that.
But
it's really hard to separate win totals from are they a playoff team? Because people go, are they they should be a playoff team. Like that's like what we were saying about the Royals over under. They don't have to go to the playoffs to cash us in a little bit of money. Toronto can win you 80 games and then not even sniff the playoffs.
With it being juiced at minus 140, there's a little joke with different podcasts that I've listened to where they always talk about, some people aren't willing to pay that much juice. Well, you only lose the juice if you lose the bet. So you have to look at that as, okay, if it goes to 79.5, it might only be minus 105. But I'd rather pay minus 140 and get that whole extra game than to have to bet less to win one more game. So you have to look at it from that aspect. I'd rather have a juice number at minus 140 and only have to get 79 than to have a minus 105 number but have to win 80. There's a big difference in one, and I mean, it might not seem like a lot with them playing so many baseball games, but in the big scheme of things, a whole baseball game is a lot.
Well, think of how many teams, I will combine playoffs and win totals. How many teams have we heard they missed it by one win? Or you were talking about the Rockies under last year and they beat the Cardinals in a comeback at the very end of the season to screw up your bet. So, I agree with you on Toronto. I think the Padres will be better. I don't know what to think of the Yankees. The Yankees are a wild card, no pun intended, because they could go out and do something big. The White Sox, I think it's getting pushed because a lot of people thought last year there's no way, and then now there's no way they do it again, but they're pretty bad. I am going to take a quick time out. I do like to save my work on the computer just in case something went wrong. And we're going to talk about, there's a couple of bets that I highlighted when I was taking notes here. You and I talked about Seattle and runs per game, and then like division winners and stuff like that. So that'll be our final segment of the day. We will come back in just a moment on StraussNet Sports Radio. We're back on StraussNet Sports Radio. One last go-around. We want to thank Marc Strauss, my dad, for being with us to talk about picking division winners and giving his thoughts on some of these teams and what they look like for this year. In some ways, a lot of it looks the same. The American League is a crapshoot, and the National League, it is. We're pretty much agreed on everything in the National League in some form or another. Tim and I had a lot of over-unders that we liked. We both agree on Kansas City and that the Cubs are going to have a good season one way or another. But let's talk about some division winners before we wrap up. Right before we get to that, I did kind of tease. So we all like the Dodgers. And the Major League Baseball single-season wins record is 117. People thought the 18 Red Sox could get to it. They had 108 wins. For some context, the Atlanta Braves are in second place on FanDuel with plus 6,000 to break that record, or to meet 117 wins. You don't even have to go over it. You just have to hit it. The record's 116, so you would be breaking the record. Anyway, I digress. The Dodgers are at plus 750. It goes from plus 6,000 to plus 750. And we all kind of agreed that's probably not going to happen. You know, people get hurt, things change. Maybe they do. Maybe they win every game this season and the World Series, and all of this is for naught. We did all predict them to win the World Series back-to-back. The bill will come due eventually for them with how much they've spent. The other thing we kind of touched on before we get to divisions, Seattle. We both talked about how good their rotation was. Marc said that they might have the most quality starts in the season of any MLB team. We've talked about how their ballpark seems to be very pitcher-friendly. Even the batter's eye seems to be a little hokey for some hitters. I don't really know why. It's just we've heard some guys talk about it. It gets cold, it stays cold there longer. It rains. They have to play with a retractable roof. Sometimes that can change things. Tim, what was it you told me you would like to take a look at doing this year?
Well, with all of those things said, they have one of the best rotations in baseball. They don't have an offense, and you have teams that are going to come in that might have a great offense but might not have as good of an offense in that ballpark. Plus, then the opposing pitchers are going to be better because of the fact that they're going against an offense of Seattle's who's not that great. So I will be looking at their home games and the total runs going under. Now, granted, chances are the over-unders in that ballpark are going to be lower because of all those factors. The casinos weren't built off of putting numbers out there that didn't make any sense, so they'll be smart, and you'll probably see a lot of 6 and 7 run over-unders for those. And for those
of you who don't know scoring at home, over-under run totals, it's your run total. It's exactly what it sounds like. It's if you have a 6.5 run total to be over or under, that means the home team can score 4 runs and the opposing team can score 3, or it can be 6-0, 7-0, or whatever. Any which way, as long as that run total is over or under, whatever that number is.
It's both teams. How many runs do you think that they're going to combine for the game? I will be looking at taking unders in Seattle home games this season.
It's a lot like people like to take Coors Field, the overs, just because of how much offense gets put up there. And the Rockies aren't even always good, but the ball flies there. Arizona's another one where you can have some overs. You know what's going to be an interesting one? I heard this today, and this is something I'd like to see you keep track of as well. You know that Tampa Bay is not playing in their park this year.
They're playing in a minor league
park.
They're
playing at Steinbrenner Field, and they said on the broadcast today...
Same thing with...
Athletics.
They're going to be playing in Sacramento. And you have the fact that now, not only are they playing in minor league parks, which is going to make a huge difference, they're also playing in places with extreme weather, and they're going to be outside. They're going to be playing in Sacramento where it could be 100 and something degrees, and they're playing outside. They're going to be playing in a ballpark in Florida outside all year long. And so I don't even know what to make of that with the over-unders, and it's going to be very, very interesting how they put that together. And those are going to be major numbers, and I'm going to be looking to exploit, because the numbers that are originally going to be put out are going to be wrong.
The Oakland thing is going to be Oakland, Sacramento. For everyone saying, but they're in California. California's a big state. Sacramento, California. Let's double check on the map for my sake. Let's see where. Come on, open in maps. I want to see this. It didn't help me at all. My Google, thanks for nothing. All right, so Sacramento is how far south is. Sacramento is actually north of San Francisco. So I'm going to say this. Tampa's going to be a different situation. John Rooney of the Cardinals, when they went out there to San Francisco, he would talk about how the games can be cold there. It can get cold at night. It can be windy at weird times of the year, too, like June even. So Sacramento, they're going further north of the San Francisco and Oakland area. You might get lower scoring games there if it's colder weather longer. Conversely, they said on the Yankees-Tigers radio broadcast today, Steinbrenner Field's dimensions, I don't think Steinbrenner Field's dimensions are that of Yankee Stadium, but they are actually apparently some shorter porches. They were predicting, this was a Tigers radio broadcast, said, I think the Tampa Bay Rays are going to be, they're going to score a lot of runs because they could actually hit more home runs there because it's shorter fences. Now, I don't know what that means for the teams in terms of like crowd energy. We saw in 2020 and 2021 when we had either no fans or limited fans due to weird rules that some teams and some players, it didn't bother them and some it did. Steinbrenner Field holds a decent crowd. I don't think it's going to be a problem there. And we didn't see a lot of people in Tampa. The A's are going to be weird because all those Oakland fans, they were loud even when there weren't that many at the game. They're a very rambunctious group. And I don't think they're going to travel to see the team, even if it's close to them, because they're gonna want to stick it up the you-know-what of their owners for moving the team. So I think crowd factors in. I think the weather will factor in. Those will be very fun to watch what happens with those games early on in terms of the betting numbers.
Yeah, with Tampa Bay, I actually was looking at their under 81.5 win total for the season, but because of the fact that they are playing in a place where it's a minor league park, I'm leaving it alone because I just don't know what to think with that. And so then maybe I should probably have the same aspect with Oakland, but I honestly think that they are might be a little bit of a scrappy club and not as bad as they used to be. They pulled off winning 69 games last year, and I think they're better. So a 70 is not out of the realm of possibility. Their over-under team win total is at 72.5, and I like the over. But one of the things that you can do on as an example as FanDuel is they'll bunch a bunch of teams up in teams that you think are going to win 70 or more games. Now, granted, do I think the Atlanta Braves are going to win 70 games? Yeah, easily they could win 90. But you're going to have to
number move.
You're
the
gonna
A's
have
are
to
71.5 now.
You're going to have to pay so much money to get Atlanta at 70 wins that it doesn't make any sense. But paying minus 148 for Oakland to win 70 or more games, to me, is good value. I wouldn't have to spend as much on the juice to take their team win total of 71.5 or 72.5 over. But to me, spending the extra juice to get 2 or 3 baseball games is worth it. Now, on the flip side, I like the Cubs team total win over 85.5, 86.5, which I took. And I'm getting a plus 130 price for them to win 90 games or more. So I'm willing to pay the extra on Oakland at minus 148 to only have to win 70 games. And I'm willing to take the chance because I think the Cubs could win 90 games. I'm going to take the value price at plus 130 to take that. Those are 2 things that I haven't done yet that I'm going to. And my eyes were opened about the Blue Jays today. And at a plus 1,100 price to win the division, at a plus, I don't even remember what it was, 2,000 and something to win the pennant. Those are two to.
You said Toronto on FanDuel is 2,500 for the pennant.
For the pennant and a plus 1,100 to win the division. I'm going to take a little something to put on those. I'm leaning to take their win total over 78.5. That's going to be possibly my third one that I'm going to take. And speaking of divisions,
So this is a good segment into the divisions.
The Padres at plus 950 to win the division. No one's talking about them. They're going to be a really good baseball team. I don't see how they're not going to make the playoffs. So that the value, you just can't, like, plus 950, the value on that is ridiculous. You don't have to bet a lot of money to get a lot of return on your investment. You can put $10 on something, and what does $10, I mean, in the big scheme of things of life, to have a little fun, what's $10 to possibly win enough money to go out to a really nice dinner?
That goes back to the three of the bets I made, where I took Cardinals at plus 1,000 in a division that feels kind of open, besides the Cubs, if something goes wrong for them. The Red Sox in a division that now with the Yankees injuries is very open, and the Royals in a wide open AL Central. If something goes wrong for the Dodgers are minus 650 to win their division because everyone thinks they're going to do it.
It absolutely makes no sense to ever take anything that's at minus 160. You literally
160
have to minus 650. Excuse me, minus 650. Forget what I just said. Minus 650. It makes no sense to ever. I mean, you literally have to bet $650 to win 100 or $6.50 to win $1. It absolutely makes no sense ever to put anything like that.
While we're on the NL West, the Arizona Diamondbacks, who we both said, we kind of like them. Same principle as the Padres, except the Padres were definitely good last year. Diamondbacks are plus 1,000 to win that division. I feel stronger about the Padres than the Diamondbacks, but same logic. NL Central we touched on. Cubs are minus 105. Brewers plus 290. Reds are plus 490. Cardinals are currently plus 850. And that was before they made it to spring training. So it was before they announced, hey, we're probably keeping Nolan Arenado, at least for now. That whole thing could go in the toilet if they trade Arenado tomorrow. But Pirates are plus 1,000 still. But the betting world agrees with us on the Cubs. NL East, this might surprise you. The Atlanta Braves are the leading candidate for the AL East. They are plus 135. The Phillies are plus 180. So despite them losing Max Fried, maybe it's the Ronald Acuna Jr. factor, but the Philadelphia Phillies are not the favorite to win the NL East.
Flip a coin in the NL East. Atlanta, the Mets, or Philadelphia could win that division. I like Atlanta to win the division, but if I was actually going to bet on it, I would rather take the Phillies or the Mets at plus 180 or plus 210 because of the fact that their value is better and they have just as good of a chance or maybe even a better chance to win that division. The same thing when you're looking at, as an example, the AL Central. You've got Minnesota at plus 210. You've got plus 250 on Detroit, plus 280 on the Royals, and plus 310 on Cleveland. I think Minnesota could easily win that division, but if I'm going to put money on it, I'd rather get better value on any of those other teams that could easily win that division. And it's like that all over the American League. I think the Red Sox at plus 300 and the Blue Jays at plus 1,100 are very good value and much better value than your Baltimore or your the Yankees. I like the Yankees to win that division, but I'm not going to put money on them to win the division because I'm not getting the value that I'm looking for.
We have the opposite situation with betting as we do with Pick'em. Pick'em, it's like, oh, who's going to win? Well, in betting, we're looking for that. I call it the sweet spot, the happy zone. The Royals are a nice happy zone team. I loved the Texas Rangers 2 years ago to win the World Series because they were a happy zone team. That's my term. That's not a real term. The Texas Rangers in 2023, where they looked like they could unseat the Astros as a division winner, but because the Astros were coming off of winning the World Series, people weren't going to bet against the Astros, so the Rangers were a team that very well could win the World Series, but were being the books were putting the lines out on them as a middling team. So it was like, yeah, take this. Kansas City Chiefs, not this past year, but the year before when they beat San Francisco, they were going to have to play in the wild card round. They weren't one of the best division winners. And they were getting all sorts of good juice for them to win because people were doubting them. The Yankees and Orioles, the Orioles are like the reverse of this. I think they're a trap team. We have all three said the Orioles don't necessarily have enough pitching, and they're not necessarily aggressive on the trade market. We all like the Blue Jays and the Red Sox. Like the Blue Jays are plus 1,100 to win this division, but I don't see them as being much worse, if at all, than Baltimore.
Someone might look at me with what I just said and say that I'm contradicting myself. And one of the things that I talk about with betting, because that's what this segment is about, is value. I just spoke about how the Yankees at plus 150, you're getting better value at plus 300 and plus 1,100 on the Blue Jays and the Red Sox. I just talked about how Atlanta at plus 135, you're getting better value at plus 180 and plus 210 on the Mets and Philadelphia. So someone might say to me, well, then why did you take the Cubs at plus 100 when there's better value on Milwaukee at plus 290 or Cincinnati at plus 410 or the Cardinals at plus 850? Well, it is all about value. And I'm looking at that Cubs number at plus 100, and I think it should be way higher.
The difference is the AL East is more open. You think the NL Central is more Cub heavy. Like this, it's like we're talking about the Dodgers. This team's probably going to win. Whereas the AL East, these teams could all win. By the way, I have breaking news. Like this exact second, Garrett Cole will undergo Tommy John surgery, not the bracing thing. He's going under Tommy John. He will miss the entire season. That is official. It's on MLB and Yahoo. He is done for the year. We don't know how long into next year. So all those Yankees numbers, in fact, all right, Yankees are at plus 150. Let's see if anything has updated. Like, I just want to see if this happens live.
It'll take a little while. But,
yeah, maybe it will.
I think the Cubs number should be more like minus 150 or minus 200. To win that division. So that's why, it's all about value. And I think that the Cubs at plus 100 was an easy one.
So we said the AL East, we think that the Yankees can win it, even with the Garrett Cole news. We like the Red Sox. We like Toronto. I'm not ruling Baltimore out. We talked about the AL Central briefly. We kind of went around the country here. We're going to end on the AL West. They have the Astros at plus 180, the Rangers at plus 190, Seattle at plus 200. And then the Angels and the Athletics fall off a cliff there. We all said how any of those three teams actually could have a chance. I still think the Astros are being underrated just because, it's been there, won that. I do think we're seeing some transition, but they still have Yordan Alvarez. They still have Framber Valdez. They still have Jose Altuve, who, even though he's moving to the outfield, is still a good player. The Texas Rangers look a lot like what they did a couple years ago, even if they've replaced some parts. Is there anything special there, Tim, or is this kind of face value here?
I'm actually more than likely going to go out and pick some division winners for entertainment. It's not going to be anything crazy. I like the Rangers to win that division, and I think that value is there with them. And one thing real quick that I want to just throw a dart at, since we're talking about betting, is you can take teams just to make the playoffs. And one quick thing I wanted to mention, since we were talking about the Rangers, since we were talking about the Blue Jays, and we were talking about different teams that have kind of are under our radar, the Rangers to make the playoffs is minus 128. I think that's a good number. The Royals is plus 134, and the Blue Jays are plus 225. I think there's some value in those numbers. And in the National League, even though the Cubs is minus 170 to make the playoffs, I think that's going to happen. And the Padres at minus 106 jumps off the board.
This is more of a clerical thing, but on FanDuel's website, I'm pretty sure you can There's two different ways you can take teams to make the playoffs, but it's the same number. Like I said, this is a clerical thing. They list all the teams here as which is essentially a playoff yes, but then you can go down to the individual team and do playoffs yes or no. So you can actually bet against them. Now, I think some of that has to do with you can select multiple teams to do a parlay. But like I'm looking at the Yankees here at minus 250, but then if I go down to New York Yankees playoffs, it's actually minus 245 on the individual team yes or no. So that's weird. And then plus 190 for no. So there's actually two different spots you can take a team for playoffs yes. I think it's just to make playoffs or playoffs. Yeah, that's weird.
Yeah, it's there's so many different angles, and that's where I basically try to look at different ways where my value is.
Most of these are the same because you mentioned Texas at minus 128. Yes is the same there. Cardinals playoffs yes is 490, and their to make the playoffs is 490. I don't understand why the Yankees one is different at plus 250 versus the plus 245. But
well, now that actually jumps out at me. So minus 245. I mean, to me, to not make the playoffs at plus 190,
plus 250, and then if you go down to New York Yankees and drop down menu, it's 245 and the 190 for no playoffs.
Yeah, well, I mean, so the no is at plus 190 is what jumps out at me at this point.
Yeah, but there's the other thing. We talked about the AL. We both think, all three of us thought, the Yankees are a playoff team. They may not be a pennant winner at this point. Maybe they are, but they seem like a playoff team anyway. If something were to happen to Max Fried, that might be the dagger.
Well, and what you were talking about as an example, you have to shop around and you have to look at your numbers. And I'll end it with this perfect example. You can go to the National League on the Padres to make the playoffs is minus 106. Well, then you can go to the Padres individual yes and no to make the playoffs, and the yes is minus 102. So why would you take minus 106 and spend the extra money on that when you could just take their yes at minus 102 and save a little bit of money if you think they're going to make the playoffs? Which actually, I'm going to take the minus 102 on the yes for the Padres to make the playoffs because I don't see how they're not going to be a wild card team.
Yeah, I mean, unless I'm misreading it, and this is just a parlay selector, because it mentions you can parlay up to 4 teams. So they just changed. Yankees literally just changed in front of me. They're minus 210 to make the playoffs now after the Garrett Cole news. That I was waiting for that, but they're minus 196 to make the playoffs. Yes, so it is different. Let's see divisions. AL East plus 165 now. Win total. New York Yankees regular season wins is now at 88.5. What was it a few minutes ago?
89.
89. So they dropped them a win. They were at 92.5 at one point. So, and yeah, literally, I didn't even have to refresh. I was looking at it, and a bunch of red and green boxes popped up, and like all the numbers just changed.
The Red Sox and Orioles are both now at plus 270 to win the division. The Red Sox were plus 300 just a few minutes ago.
And I got them at plus 440. Blue Jays didn't move. They're still at plus. Well, no.
They did.
Plus 1,100 before.
Yep. They did move.
So the Garrett Cole news coming out changed the entire landscape, even if it's by a little. So and that's how it happens, folks. I've seen him looking at numbers in game. The real fun we've had before is we were standing in line at a Blues playoff game, and he goes, "You want to do like no score after the first 3 innings of this Phillies game?" And we did, and we're sitting there watching the stat tracker, and so we'll be watching something. It was the first inning. I thought it was first 3. You can do first 3. You can do first 5. Really, the reality is if you go anywhere, you can bet on anything. You could bet on Korean soccer.
I'm not condoning any of that, but sometimes it's fun if you're standing in line at a Blues game. For me, maybe someone might think I'm a degenerate, and that's fine. But we were standing in line to get in the Blues game, and I put like runs to be scored, yes or no, in the first inning for entertainment.
And then we got into the game, and it was a good day. But it was a funny case. Yeah, that's a look into our betting world for the baseball season. So, what did we take out of this whole show, going all the way back to the division winners? I think what is going to happen to the Yankees. I think one of the highlights of today was what will the Blue Jays do. We all think we were both convinced at this point that the Blue Jays could be a major factor in the season if players stay healthy. We all think the Dodgers are going to win. We all think the NL East is going to be a beast and very fun to watch. We like Kansas City as a good team. Maybe not an elite team, but a good team. The Texas Rangers could go back to the World Series. I think the Boston Red Sox are going to have a fantastic year. We all like Seattle's pitching, but they refuse to get a major slugger. The Padres stand out to me. And we all have... My wife is just doing laps right now around me. You keep saying the Cubs are going to be good this year. You think the Cubs are good. Maybe it's your time to switch. No, I'm really hoping that the floor falls out from under you guys. Yeah, I might get her to switch to being a Blues fan from Blackhawks because she's gone to more Blues games than Blackhawks games. But that's neither here nor there. I accused her of being a bigger Chiefs fan than Packers fan after the... when we got to go to the AFC title game, and she was all about it, and she's like, I enjoyed, getting to know this team with you, and it's my second favorite team. I'm like, well, you became a Packers fan to spite your Bears fan brothers. Maybe you're a bigger a bigger Chiefs fan. She's like, I don't think so. I'm like, we'll find out, but. We are not leaving Cardinal Nation. We just think the Cubs are probably going to have a better year. When your management tells you, we're going to save some money and keep it, you don't really think your team's going to be as good as they possibly could be because the priorities aren't straight. So, and the Cub fans know about that. They had a letter to season ticket fans literally telling them that before last season. So, here's to a good baseball season. We are coming up on the hockey playoffs. Might get a podcast in about that before that all starts. Go Blues. Tim reminded me this past week of some nostalgia. I liked watching the Red Wings back during the Zetterberg and Datsuk and Lidstrom era. He has some money on them to maybe make the playoffs. We'll see what happens with the hockey playoffs. Right now, there's a lot of good teams in the Western Conference. The East seems like a little bit more of a crapshoot, but we'll see how the hockey playoffs go. We're getting to some of our favorite time of the year. Hockey playoffs, baseball kicking off. You'll probably hear back from me around the hockey playoffs, and if not, it'll be about the All-Star week at latest. Absolute latest. Try to get back on this horse. My computer was giving me some technical difficulties, and I was having trouble getting everything up and running. But for now, I want to thank my dad, Marc Strauss, for joining us. Tim, thank you for being here.
It was a pleasure.
And we will see you next time on StraussNet Sports Radio. Go Cardinals.
Don't blame us if we ever doubt ya. You know we couldn't live without ya. Boss